Hello, and welcome to the Coder Kids podcast episode
23?
I think 23.
I think so.
Guys, last week we did a last minute gift guide for Christmas. Christmas is just around the bend. Today we're recording this on Tuesday. Christmas is Friday. So we're very excited about that.
Today, Christmas. Yeah.
And today, as always, I have James Thornock with me. James,
right.
Say hello to the people.
Hello. Me and my geometric background.
I just
hi.
noticed I have this spot on my glasses. It's on the inside.
Well.
Everyone, today on the podcast, we have special guests Jesse Grimm and Alli Cardenas, who are from Acton Academy, Katy.
Yep.
That's in the... Man, I look so weird without glasses. Like when I've been wearing glasses for a while, I look weird.
I think you're overestimating that. You look fine either way.
Thanks, James. I appreciate that. Let's do a couple updates really quick.
Sure.
And then we'll dive into our interview, which was a really great chat with these two.
Yeah. So,
James, what's the update from you?
Well, I had a little bit of an early Christmas with my folks who went out of town. And so they came over and they actually all had COVID tests. And they all came back negative. Otherwise, they didn't come.
Okay.
Of their own accord. Fun times. But yeah, it was really nice to be able to have Christmas in our home and to have family over, some that I hadn't seen in like well over a year. And it was great to just, do Ziploc stockings and to, trade presents. I got this super cool water bottle. Check this out. It's not that expensive or anything, but just I love the colors. I think
that is
the
nice.
top is a little bit green. For those of you on the podcast, it's called A Little Outdoorsy is the name of the water bottle. It's like a dark purple, got a sienna, a teal, an olive, and like a tan color. I just love. It's
blending in with the background a little bit.
Yeah, with the green is getting cropped out by the green screen. But
cool. Well, that sounds fun.
Got a water bottle for Christmas. I'm living
my
large.
brief update is we just got back from Dallas. The last two episodes are recorded from Dallas. I am back in Utah. It's supposed to snow today. We'll see if it does. And actually tomorrow we're headed out again to go to California for Christmas. So it's just been a lot of travel, which is ironic in this year of COVID. But, my parents already had COVID. So unless they're getting it again this soon, that would be a surprise. But anyway, all is well. No COVID for us. And we're going to California where they'll probably take our names and write down our information and make sure that we're staying inside.
In protocol.
And I'm worried about... Shout out to all the California listeners. I don't know if it's bad there, but it certainly, from the outside looking in, it kind of seems a little bit East German. So,
yeah.
You didn't want to call it like Gestapo.
Yeah.
Let's not go as far as Gestapo. But, well, East German is, I don't know. Was East German Gestapo? I don't know. I thought Gestapo was like Nazi Germany.
Yeah. Anyway,
so
I'm talking about East all the
German.
terms that you were trying to avoid, you've said. So we're
good.
we're good. We love you, California. I have family in Sacramento. It's a wonderful place to visit.
Oh my gosh, California is amazing. It's amazing.
I love the redwoods, especially been to
Yosemite
National Park.
We could talk for hours about beautiful things about California. Man,
I love Texas more at the end of the day, but California, you got a special place in the heart.
Well, you know me. I do not. Guys, let's talk briefly about this interview we're about to transition to.
Yes.
If you're interested at all about reaching out to these folks because they have a really amazing educational philosophy, just go to Google, type in Acton Academy, Katy. Or if you're listening from somewhere not in Houston, then go to Google and type in Acton Academy and look for one near you because the model and the philosophy is the same.
Acton.
Acton. Get it done.
Yeah, and
right, James.
We'll also be including, whatever contact information in the show notes, of course, as well. But without further ado,
Wait, I got one
Whoa.
more announcement.
One more. Okay.
For those listening, we've got a winter camp that starts
Yes.
December 28th, and we've got our spring classes that start in January.
Yeah, 4 winter camps. You got
Yep, 4
Python,
winter camps.
Roblox, Scratch, and Minecraft. The Minecraft one, of course, just blew up. So be sure to save your spot. It's very popular.
For sure. All right, without further ado, kick it over.
All right, welcome to the interview portion of the podcast today. With us, as always, we have Jeff Ward, the founder of Coder Kids. Do you want to introduce our guest today?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll introduce Jesse Graham, is a founder of Acton Academy, Katy, and has been working in Acton for a number of years now. And that's how we initially met. Jesse has a Rice MBA as well. And we're working on a business that I mentioned on this podcast before called Mastery Genius. And so we get a lot of together time. Jesse, do you want to introduce our other fourth guest?
Absolutely. This is Alli. She is a guide at Acton Academy, Katy. She guides what we call our Spark learners. There are 5 to 7-year-olds, and she has jumped right in to that role. She previously was a kindergarten teacher and has a lot of pre-K experience. And so she's just jumped right in with the Montessori type learning and really just been a learner herself, getting acclimated to being a guide because that role is so much different than a teacher. So
awesome. Great to have both of you on the podcast today and talk a little bit about Acton. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about technology and how Acton uses technology to enhance learning. So maybe we could just start out there. And Alli, I know you can talk more to the younger kids.
Yeah.
What drew you both to Acton, and what keeps you there?
Yeah. Well,
Who
I'll
should start, Jeff? I guess Alli will.
Well, Alli's starting, so go ahead, Alli.
Yeah. Well, I found Acton in my search, both for my next step in my career and also for my 5-year-old son who was starting kindergarten. And I knew traditional school wasn't going to be the right fit for him, having been in the classroom myself, and just knowing that in traditional school, basically everyone is on the same track. He was or is very advanced academically, especially with math. But more than that, I wanted an environment that would honor him and his uniqueness. And so I looked at Montessori, I looked at Reggio Emilia, I looked at a lot of different programs. And when I found Acton and came to the open house, I knew it was the right fit for a few reasons. One of them being the individualized approach that Acton can offer every learner through technology. That's an advantage that I think we have over every other philosophy right now. So that was a big draw.
Yeah. How about you, Jesse? You got started a number of years ago. What initially drew you to the Acton model?
So very similar story to Alli's. It was my oldest daughter was set to start kindergarten, and just looking at their curriculum, she kind of knew everything. And so being in education, I knew the issues, that were there, and I just wasn't comfortable sending her there. And so I started doing my research and found the Acton that was in Houston. And from that time to now, that's 5 or 6 years. The advances that we've made in Acton just with technology have been, monumental. Just learning how to use the technology efficiently has been, we've made, great strides in that regard. And now to where we're at, specifically at Acton Katy, is using, individualized, prescriptive, unique academic lessons for our learners, where there's no two paths that are exactly the same. And if I can kind of dive in a little bit to there's a lot of parents that are concerned, like just with screen time and stuff like that, with how we use technology, but the value, I think, greatly outweighs how much they're on screens, and it just, in 10 minutes, they can work through what would take a traditional school a whole day. If they can log on and master fractions or some aspect of fractions in 30 minutes, whereas a teacher is going to have to take 2 days for everybody. That's the advantage that we have. And so it allows us, using that technology allows us the time to then explore all the other aspects and things that they're curious about. And so that's really what keeps me here is, I wanted to join Acton for the academic side of the self-paced curriculum, but it's that level of technology and using it like we do allows us so many other things that's what keeps me here is sort of all the non-academic stuff. That the academic stuff is great, but it's the exploring of curiosities and finding of passions that really keeps me here.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe we should have started here, but like Alli, could you just break down for us briefly, like for those who don't know about Acton, because I'm familiar with Acton because of my time in education, knowing Jesse and knowing Mike. But a lot of people probably who are out there have never even heard of Acton, and there might not be one. It's a pretty big scene in Houston, but it's not as big in other places. So could you break down a little bit the model for everyone to understand?
Well, one of the main tenets of our model, and another thing that had really drawn me as a parent, was the idea that every learner, every child, every person is a genius, and we're all on a hero's journey. And I felt like that was something that felt consistent with my values as a teacher, to not just see learners or students as an academic, but as someone who has unique gifts to offer to the world. And so that was a really big draw for me. Jesse can probably talk a little bit more about the details of our model, but that's the real premise.
Yeah, Jesse, why don't you dive in a little bit about like what you guys do on a day-to-day basis and how it looks different from normal school?
Sure. So the biggest difference, if we could kind of frame it in a short phrase, would be a learner-driven community. And so from the moment they step foot in the door to the moment they leave, they're in charge of their community. Initially, when we start a year, we give them 3 guidelines, and that's it. And they form everything else. They build the community, and we give them the time and space to do that. So our first 6 weeks, our first 7 weeks look drastically different than what a traditional school is going to look like. They're spending the time, building out all the rules, all the procedures. They spend every minute with each other playing games, going over different topics, discussing things. And then after they've established those procedures and those norms, then you can really dive into more of the academic side and the project-based learning side. And basically our day splits into 2. It's the morning is what we call our core skills. So that's where they're going to be working on their self-paced reading, their self-paced math, writing, and it depends on the level. But science and civilizations or social studies are in there as well for our older learners. And then the afternoon becomes our project-based learning, where we give them a real-world problem or real-world scenarios, and they take the core skill learning that they've done and they apply it to those scenarios. So the quests, we call them quests. The ones we just did during December was a detective quest. So they basically became forensic scientists or forensic detectives. They learned how to take fingerprints. They, took their own DNA, did shoe castings to determine a suspect's height. So, every day, it was something new and it was a different activity for them to work through. And so that afternoon, really that's what I didn't excel at that when I started, but I've probably put more and more time creating those projects because I see the value in those far more than the academic side. So the mornings are important. Absolutely. Math, reading, writing, those are great. But really the real world skills that they need to learn come from those afternoon, that project-based learning. And then really the other thing that really sets us apart is the, overarching theme of just pure accountability and self-directed behavior. So with all the rules that they've established, if they see another learner, crossing a boundary or breaking a rule, then it's their job to enforce those rules and offer consequences. And so they do a really good job of that. So, I'm sitting right now kind of off in the corner, and this is where I'd be during the day. And I can kind of sit here from 9 to 11:30. And I typically don't have to talk to a learner if I don't need to, right? Because I want them to handle pretty much the entire day. And so that's the goal, is to put all of their learning and the entirety of the studio in their hands, to be, like I said, learner driven.
And that's the biggest shift for me too, coming from traditional school where I'm in charge of the discipline, I'm in charge of the accountability, I'm in charge of teaching the content. And now I don't have to teach the content, right? At least the academic content, the software does that. I have to get involved probably a little bit more than Jesse, just because of the years, but they hold each other accountable. They know the rules, they set the rules, and I can kind of step back. I don't have to be the bad guy and truly just be in the guide role when they need me.
That's great.
Yeah.
So when you do guide them, what does that look like? Do you just like gently remind them of a rule, or like what does that look like?
Yeah, and for the 5 through 7-year-olds, there's still a lot of social skills that are being developed, how to problem solve, how to, if you have an argument with a friend, how do you handle it, sharing, that kind of thing. But Jesse does a lot of that too. I think just it might look a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
The biggest difference between a guide and a teacher is going to be that a guide, we don't offer any direct instruction, and then we don't answer questions. So if they come to us with what time is it, or what's next on the schedule, or what do I do, or I can't get past this math problem, or, we're not going to rescue them. And so they have to be the ones that go and find a fellow learner, or find some resource that's going to enable them to answer the question or solve the dilemma that they have. So as a guide, we really just ask questions a lot. And in that, even if there's a sort of a tense or frustrating situation, again, we're not going to come in and rescue them and say, okay, you do this, you do that, or separate them if they're arguing. We're just going to ask questions, and most of the time at this age, it just comes down to figuring out what the facts were of the story, like what is actually happening. And then once everybody agrees on a set of facts, then they typically go about and can solve the problem. And so,
it's funny.
They don't need to build.
It's really hard to get into Jesse's super good at asking questions, but as a parent, it's like hard to get in that habit. It's like, Dad, what time is it? Jesse would say, how could you find out what time it is?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like very frustrating. Or my son this morning is coming up to me like, I'm bored. It's like, and actually I did successfully do this one. I was like, what could you do to not be bored? Right.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
And
my
so,
favorite question, sorry, when it comes to boredom, my favorite question is, well, who's in charge of your boredom? And they hate that.
They hate it. Yeah.
Like, go be on board. I don't care. Like, your boredom's not bothering me.
Yeah, my grandpa said, I was 8 years old. I remember this vividly, and he said, I think I said, I'm bored, and he said, I'm never bored, and I thought that's impossible, and then he listed about like 100 things that I could do, and he said, you never have to be bored. Like, you live in 1998. There's so much to do. And if you run out of everything else to do, you can actually just sit there and think about stuff. And so I've never been bored since 1998. Yeah, I know. He's a funny guy, but he's right. So I haven't been bored since 1998, unless I've been like forced to do something just like soul crushing. But other than that, it's
What about
realizing you don't have to be bored is some incredible thing. It's a lot. It makes life so much better.
Sorry, Alli, what were you gonna say?
I said, what about standing in line at the DPS?
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. Professional development as a teacher, man.
I mean, yeah. So that's when the thinking comes in, right? That's when you like foster your rage for your government,
daydreaming,
and
well, let's sorry, James, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to know a little bit more about I spent a little bit of time in the studio, so I kind of know, but talking about technology and how you guys use it, like what are some of the tools that you use, or like how does a child use the technology on a day-to-day basis? And Alli, I'm curious, now that you're working with a few Spark learners, like what is the role of technology in their learning? Are they there yet, or is it more hands-on stuff?
Yeah, they're there. Yeah, so Jesse will probably talk more about the software, but we use software called Pathblazer, and the learners are using that in my room for about 30 minutes a day. After the winter break, it'll go up to about an hour a day to prepare them for more time once they move up to the next level. But yeah, they kids, it comes naturally to them. They know how to do everything on the software, and yeah.
Jess, you want to jump in and talk a little bit more about like the advanced, some of the stuff you guys use for advanced learning?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to echo or kind of expand on what Alli is saying is, one of the questions I get from parents a lot is, does my 5-year-old need a laptop? We're like, yeah, they can have a laptop. I'm like, well, will they know how to use it? Like, yeah, they'll figure it out. They can do it. Like, it's amazing. But as soon as they watch another learner do it, they've got it. And so them just having that tool, allows for us to go out and find the best software or combination of software that we can. And so for a long time, we really struggled. There's a lot of great educational software out there, but it just kind of, it was kind of inflexible. It wasn't adaptive. It didn't, I guess, result in growth is what we found is, a lot of them, the learners would be able to kind of not cheat their way through, but kind of game the system and just do it well enough to get by, but they weren't actually retaining any of the learning. And so last year, we started using the combination of the adaptive assessment that's called MAPS, so the measure of academic progress. And so, that's kind of an assessment that grows with them. They take it, it gives them scores in different categories for each subject. So, math breaks down into 4 categories, reading breaks down into 5, and then writing is going to break down into 3. And that data then goes to our learning curriculum. And then that designs an individualized plan for them. And so if a learner really excels, let's say in geometry, but struggles with number and operations, those geometry tasks that they have to do are at a higher level than what the number and operations are. And in addition to that, it's mastery based. So they can't just rush through it. They can't, skip the instruction and then just try to answer the questions, right? I mean, they can, but most likely they're going to fail. And then when they fail, to show mastery, it pushes them back to the instruction. And so if you had a tutor that was 1-to-1, that's what this essentially is, but it's software. And so that's where the value is it doesn't let them move on until they've shown mastery, until they've learned it. And so when, some of it they love, like some of the software they love, like our fast facts, our fast math facts software that they use, because it's very much a game and they get to play. And then they talk about Pathblazer, and they actually don't like Pathblazer very much. And that's actually a really good sign, because the reason they don't like it sometimes is because it's challenging, because it's teaching them exactly what they're learning. So it's not review, it's not simple. They have to listen to the instruction. They have to do the practice. They have to master the concept. And I think that reflects as much of a real world scenario as you could want. Because, how many times in our days do we have to go and research how to do something, practice, and then actually do it, or, perform some task on a job. And so this is the best combination of testing and software that we've ever found. And, to go back to the assessment, it remembers when they finish, it remembers where they are. And so they come back and take it, and it starts them, where they were or where they finished. It's not some generic, 3rd grade, okay, now you're supposed to be in 3rd grade, so here's the 3rd grade test. It starts them exactly where they left off. So as a parent, as a guide, as the learner themselves, they get to see how much they've grown. And for them, that's really, really exciting. They know, we have certain metrics they have to meet to earn their learning badges. And so if they have to score, let's say a 203 on the math assessment to earn the level 2 badge or whatever it may be, they know that. And so I scored a 197 last time, I need 6 more points. And, that really motivates them to then, when they get to the assessment, to really push through and try their best and answer the question, because it means something. It's it's not just some generic state mandated or federally mandated test that they have to take. It's, they take it on their own time. When they're ready, they come and tell me, hey, I'm ready to take my maps reading again. So, okay, let's do it tomorrow. There's no waiting on anybody else. It's all individualized, and it means something to them.
So I want to ask a little bit, what's the difference in philosophy, and Alli, maybe you can speak to this, but what's the difference in philosophy, testing or assessment, whatever you want to call it, in a public school setting versus what y'all are doing? We've gone over a lot of like functionally how it works, but what's the difference in like philosophy, the way that a test is viewed?
You can throw it to Jesse if you want to.
I can speak from my experience as a parent who had kids go through the good public schools, which meant competitive public schools, versus a teacher who taught in low-income schools. I feel like the test was everything. The assessment was everything, particularly in the low-income school. You were working the whole year for that test. And
how many tests were there? Like kind of like a
there's one major one.
Kindergarten, we didn't have state mandated assessments. The first one wasn't until 3rd grade, but you were still telling the kids, we need to get ready for the test, right? And so everything that you were doing, we would do like assessments just periodically every 3 months or so for math and for reading. But the reason you were doing that was for the test. It wasn't for your career one day. It wasn't for you to be a smarter, more well-rounded individual. It was for the test. And that was very clear. And then having my own kids at more competitive schools, it was kind of the same. I mean, the tests, academics were everything. I feel like here in our model, academics is just one piece of being a more well-rounded individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's not traumatizing at all, right? Like for 3 years of your life, you're gonna put everything into like a 2 or 3 hour window or like one day of testing, and then like how you test is how you rank as a human being, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like every year. Yeah, so yeah, that's not traumatizing at all, right? That's why I ask it's a bit of a leading question. Like I know the answer, right? Because I taught. The other thing is you're totally right. It rank orders academics above things like extracurricular activities, like choir and some other things that I was in. I taught Texas history in 7th grade, and that is not a federally tested subject. And so what happened was after school, they had me as a teacher help with the U.S. history students who were falling behind, and it was it was our job as Texas history teachers to go in and help 8th grade to get their students, because they couldn't do it enough, so that they could get their U.S. history down, and in order so that they could perform better on the test. It wasn't so that they could love history or like develop a passion about the Constitution.
Right.
I taught that outside of my, I taught that because I love the Constitution, but like that's not what my job was, right? And it was very clear that my subject was secondary, even though an academic subject it was definitely secondary. And I can only imagine, sister-in-law I've mentioned a couple times, she teaches choir, which is the hardest subject to teach during a pandemic where you're singing, but and you're in large groups, but James, it definitely rank orders. Yeah,
I was going to jump in and say that the first time I went and met with Mike, who runs a school called Acton Academy Champions, is what it's called now, right, Jesse? Mm-hmm. He told me, and I don't know if this is still like part of the Acton philosophy or your philosophy, but he told me like when kids graduate from 12th grade, they want them to know what they like to do, what they could do to like get a job and make money, and how they want to make the world a better place. Right. And I was reflecting with that about those 3 things with my wife, because personally, I feel like I graduated from high school with no idea what I wanted to do. I went to college with no idea what I wanted to do. I went and served a church mission. And when I was on my church mission, like toward the last like 6 months of it, my parents were like, look, you got to choose a major because you're coming back to school and you got to choose a major. So they like sent me a course catalog, and I was looking through everything, and I was like, well, I had very limited perception, like very limited understanding of what the world and careers look like. And so I didn't understand, like when I was telling my wife, when someone told me that they wanted to be a banker, I thought that literally meant a teller at the bank or possibly like an account manager at the bank. Like I had no idea that there was like a whole financial system where we offer like massive amounts of loans and mergers and acquisitions and all this stuff. So anyway, long story short, I ended up choosing political science because I was like, well, I like politics, I like, learning about government and politics and stuff. And so I think it's an interesting perspective, like coming from someone who I feel like I did a lot of like forced learning and didn't really get to like choose my path. And so to look at it from this perspective of Acton, where kids, like, it's not just all about like the test and like pass the test and get into college. It's like, what is your purpose ultimately? Seeking out that greater purpose that, like what you like to do, what you think you get paid for, and how you want to help the world.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what you said, I didn't really like going to school until maybe my junior year of college, when I started to dive into stuff that actually interested me. And I don't know why we have this idea that like school is supposed to not be fun. Like everything we do here is so fun, and the kids can take the time and pursue the things that really interest them.
And it's fun with a purpose, I don't want some parent out there thinking like it's not rigorous. You can have something that's really demanding and enjoyable at the same time. Anyone who's ever speed around a video game knows that that's both stressful and incredibly fun. So I think just wanted to butt in and say that.
Jesse, did you have any thoughts on the whole choosing your purpose in life thing?
It's got the journey poster.
Hero's journey.
I know. Strategically put. The hero's journey behind me. To go back to the philosophy of just like assessments and stuff, that's one of the hardest mindsets that we have to sort of push back against when it comes to our parents, because obviously when the learners take the assessment, they get a percentile ranking, and so that's what the parents want to know, like where are they at, what percentile. And so if they show up like 35th percentile, it's panic time and we're freaking out and they're behind. And so I actually didn't even include their percentiles this year, because our focus when it comes to assessments is growth. That's the only reason we use those. I don't care if you're 8 and you score a 175, because the next time you take it, if you score a 191, that's amazing. And that's an amazing feeling to be able to show them you did this and you pretty much did it on your own because you worked hard, you had the right work ethic, you didn't get distracted, you did, you worked the way you should have worked, and this is the result. As far as, finding the passions go, this year, I don't know why, but we have some seriously entrepreneurial students. And so we have like 3 or 4 businesses operating out of the studio at any one time. And there is a transfer of money that is crazy. I'm pretty sure it's the same $20 that just keeps getting like spread around. But they're learning, because I think it was, what did they brought in like carbonated water. They put it in these little paper cups, they froze it, and then they sold it. Well, they were making a killing, like 25 cents for a cup, and you end up making $4 or $5 per dollar you spent. It's a great margin, so we're going to keep doing it. Well, without a doubt, somebody comes in as a competitor and offers theirs for 20 cents or a bigger cup or whatever it is. So that being said, it could manifest itself in any number of ways, but the passion of creating value, running a business, creating some good, a painting, a drawing, a crocheted scarf, whatever it is, bringing Halloween candy and like reselling something you just bought from somebody else. They're learning all of those things because they're trying all of those things out. And so I think this year more than any, I've realized as I've kind of taken a step back and looked at it, that it is finding their passion. It is figuring out what you want to do. But I think the biggest thing I see them doing is creating value, because, or learning how to create value, because a lot of them will bring in something that nobody wants and then be like, wait, why isn't anybody buying my stuff? And they come to me and like, Mr. Jesse, will you buy this? Like, no, I don't want that. Right. And so that's I don't mean to be the mean guy, but that's, I think, another huge lesson that they learn on that journey to figure out what they like to do. Because if you like to draw, but nobody will buy your drawings, then that's not something you should pursue as a career. Now, can you find a career and still draw? Absolutely. But, the term starving artist is there for a reason, right? You have to figure out what are you good at and what will people pay you for, and then how you can use that to change the world. And they do that every day, every minute of every day they're here. That's exactly what they're doing.
That's
I
awesome.
feel like that's such a good practice, and to Alli's comment earlier about like, oh, I started to get into school like junior year of college. Like, how old are you then? Like 18, 19, 20, something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why on earth, like, should you be on planet Earth for like 19 years before you start enjoying learning? Like, that's just like, that's wrong. That's messed up. Like, there's something not right about that system. And one of the things I worry about as a parent in the future, and then also about the kids of today, there are a lot of people with fewer and fewer siblings. I can't really change that, okay? I think people should have more babies and have more kids, and they should interact with each other.
You should talk to Jesse Graham.
I'm doing my part. James.
How many kids?
He's got
5 daughters.
Nice. I've just got one son, so.
See the bags under my eyes.
That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate the work you're doing, but I think one of the reason why is, you have kids who are socially adjusted. A lot of times, when you're talking about like homeschool versus public school, a lot of the argument is, well, I want them to be socialized. I don't want them to be isolated and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But public school is terrible for talking to people, and then recess time is just wildly decreased down to basically zero at middle school and high school levels. So you're not actually interacting that much. You're certainly not buying and selling. That's against the rules, Right, I think there was like one enterprising kid at my high school who like sold sodas out of like a chilled bag or something like that, like Mountain Dews or something. And then my brother did it. But like it's frowned upon. And that entrepreneurial like spirit still kind of bubbled up even in that kind of system. So to be able to practice at a young age, and maybe I shouldn't think of it as young, right? Maybe I should think of it as like, oh, this is a natural behavior and it happens to be, occurring at a younger age. I just think that's such a, it's just not wasting your life. And then that leads to probably better wages in the future, because they can say, well, I'm worth about this much financially because I can generate this much value about on my own. And they don't have to be 20 years old, never had a job, never like really exchanged goods or services, and they don't really know themselves. And then they'll work for kind of any pay because they don't know what their value is.
And what does that give you, right? Getting to have all that practice from a young age over people who are maybe just starting their first business, in college or after college. So
yeah, absolutely. I listened to that podcast, How I Built This, and people are, a lot of people, I mean, it's not everyone, but a lot of those guys and gals who start businesses are talking about how they were child entrepreneurs and started pretty young, just doing the things that Jesse's describing. Just selling at school, and that's Mark Cuban is the famous example of selling trash bags door to door. So I thought that was pretty funny.
No, he did that.
Yeah. Jesse, awesome. I have a question for you, or Alli, you can chime in as well. Just regarding like public school and again, Jesse and I have talked about this a number of times. Like, we don't want to be critical of teachers because we've all been teachers, and so we know that in the public school system, there are issues, but teachers work their butts off every day and they sacrifice so much. But as we think about technology and how technology can be most effectively used to be individualized to each child, we know that technology is kind of becoming more and more commonplace, maybe especially since the pandemic. But technology is becoming more and more commonplace in public schools, partly because administrators have pressure like, hey, you need to use technology more. Or, hey, we're paying big bucks for this technology, so you need to use it.
Yeah, district contracts. Yeah.
What do you think are like kind of the missteps of the public education system in terms of using technology? Or like, where do you see the gaps where people could where the public school system could improve in terms of their use of technology?
I think a lot of it just comes down to what our expectations are for academics at a certain age, right? So if you go to kindergarten or you look at what's required, and it's like they have to know how to read, and it's like, well, I've got multiple learners here that didn't really become good readers until they were 7, and you can imagine what that does and how teachers have to deal with that, because they're rated on whether or not these kids can read. And so, the technology is increasing, but it's like, here's your textbook, it's online now. And like, well, that's
Right.
not really, and I guess I see it as people don't really understand what educational technology is capable of. Especially like the combination that we use, right? It's the adaptive assessment, the prescriptive curriculum. I don't think there's not a school using that, obviously, besides us. There's no public school kind of using that. And I think it's just this reliance on this embedded philosophy of just, here's what you learn in 3rd grade. Here's what you learn in 4th grade. Here's what you learn in 5th grade. And rather than looking at it as these kind of cut up sections of learning, we should just look at it as a continuum. And I think we have to start seeing learners as individual and allowing them the time and space to learn what they need to learn when they need to learn it. And that's just such a deep question, man. I mean, you could dive into so many things. Again, I think it just goes back to the assessment, especially, we're in Texas, so the STAR assessment is just overwhelmingly massive and just kind of takes over the entire realm of education. And it's so ingrained into every system, right? Because you want to say, okay, well, it's the district that needs to change. Well, the district has mandates from the government, and everybody that's in government now went to a traditional public school, most likely, or a private school that followed the traditional model.
Yeah.
So making these changes happen is really, really difficult. But I think if there's a giant misstep, it's just not relying on the technology like we should, not allowing the technology to do what it's capable of doing.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me to think that actually our public school students would be performing so much better if they use technology in a better way.
Yeah, even the technology that they have, right?
The STAR results, I don't want them to be the be all end all, but at the same time, if they're going to be, then we should probably have kids spend a little bit of time advancing at their own level instead of doing whole group or small group instruction.
Well,
when I think that, go ahead, Alli.
When I left public school, this was about 10 years ago. So technology was just starting to enter early childhood, but it really wasn't prescriptive. It was like Jesse said, okay, these are the kindergarten skills. We don't have separate users. I mean, everybody's doing the same thing. You get, maybe 15 minutes to use the technology. And as far as I know, it's the same in early childhood anyway. And then also just the idea of learning being a continuum. I felt like it was such a travesty when I was teaching low-income kindergarten, and my daughter was maybe 1st or 2nd grade at the time at an exemplary school. I was at a Title I school, but the expectations were the same across the board, right? And so you had kids who had been to preschool and were working on ABCs and 1, 2, 3s at home with mom. And then you had other kids who had spent the majority of their toddler years in front of the TV didn't really, maybe both parents were working multiple jobs, and it wasn't fair. And then something that really stood out to me my last year in public school was the greatest indicator of success at that time it was a tax test, was the state assessment, was the education of the child's mom. So it wasn't any of this we were putting on the kids. It wasn't the work that we were doing at school. It was their home life. And that is such a huge piece that the public school is not really addressing.
Well, shout out to all the moms out there. I mean,
Yeah.
even if academically you are not spending a ton of time going over stuff with them, and maybe you are, but even if you're not, your influence as a mother really affects, like, kind of sets the tone of like their entire life. Like, my mom would not let me hear the end of less versus fewer, and I hate it because everyone says less people, but you could say fewer people because you can count them. Anyway, so forever in my life, I don't have the option. That is baked into my psyche, and all my English teachers got it wrong. So, you know, at the end of the day, my mom's going to be at my funeral. My teachers probably aren't, right? And so it's so much closer to home. And so shout out to all the moms out there who are listening to the podcast, who care so much about your kids and care so much about their journey, their education, their pathway. You have so much influence, even though it doesn't seem like it at dinner time when your kid's not eating what you put in front of them. So,
guys, I got to throw out another tangent. This is not related to education, but this is related to your belief, your philosophy on kids doing like gaming.
Oh yeah, that's
like,
a good question.
What do you guys think about kids who game, and if that's good or bad for their brains or their futures, or because we do offer like some gaming camps. James is a big gamer. I'm a moderate to small gamer. But I think there's a lot of differing opinions out there. I'd like to hear your perspective as Acton educators.
Okay. Justin, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I would say just like nutrition, balance is key, and meaning. I think the meaningfulness of it is key. So, if you're talking about playing like Call of Duty online, there's probably value in there, maybe working with a team or creating a plan, things like that. But I would say like extended use, like if you're playing that 8 hours a day, then you probably there's a limitation of the returns on that. Whereas if you're playing a game like, and say I'm old, so I don't know all of them, Minecraft, Roblox, like anytime, like you're creating or being curious, one of the great ones now is, what's it called? Among Us. And our learners love that game, and they can't play it until it's Friday. And then at a certain time, they can all get on the tablets and start playing. And they spread out throughout the studio, and they love it, and it's so much fun. Well, Monday through Thursday, then they play it offline, and they play Among Us in person, and it's some of the most hilarious stuff you'll ever see. Like you hear emergency meeting from the back of the studio, and you're like, "What's happening?"
That's awesome.
But yeah, there's definite value in gaming for sure, and especially when you jump into like the coding aspect of it. One of my learners last year was just Scratch, just loved Scratch, loved making games. He would make them and then email me a link and say, "Can you beat this level?" And I'd have to go and try to beat it. And so
it's awesome.
Yeah, and the way the direction we're heading worldwide, just with the level of technology, you've got to be well versed in technology, whether it's computer based or gaming console based or whatever. You need to have some experience, I think, in that field. So I would say there's absolute value in it, but it's got to be balanced. Alli.
Yeah, I second that. Balance and everything. As long as they're also getting outside, getting fresh air, getting to socialize, then I'm all for it. One of the things I loved so much about Montessori, but I felt like they haven't caught on to the technology piece, and kids learn technology, as you guys all know, so quickly, and that's the direction we're moving in as a world. And so to leave that piece out of it, I'm doing them this. So yeah.
Definitely. I love the way you framed it, Jesse. You said, I think, man, what were the words you used? You said, I think
I'm
that
not
if
gonna
you're playing
remember.
8 hours a day, that your returns are going to be limited, which is like,
Yeah,
dang, that's
there's a
nuanced,
business
right?
term. Well, there's a business term that I can't remember. Jeff, maybe you can help me out. But there's some, at a
It's
certain
the
point,
law
the
of
returns
diminishing
are
returns. Is that what it is?
that sounds right. Yeah, I don't
I think,
remember. That's a
yeah, my
I
dad
should
taught me
remember.
that.
But yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah,
It's
that's
like,
exactly it. Right.
yeah, and this is true with work too. So if you try to work like a 10-hour day straight with no breaks, like you'll work 10 hours and you can brag about it, but how much work you got done is, debatable
Well,
or laughable. Yeah,
and
so I think
oh,
that's
sorry,
a
Chance.
proper way to frame it, because there are some parents that I come into contact with, and they'll view, gaming camps as bad or video games as bad, and it's like, yeah, certainly. So there's some games out there that I would call bad, right? Like Cyberpunk 2077. I would probably call that one bad, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that the value to adults or to children is worth anything, basically, for the amount of like just filth in that game. I would say well, this is going to be a public podcast, so I've come out and said that now, right? But I do think it's like, well, you would never come up to a parent and say, like, do you think music is good or bad? It's like, well, it depends on the genre, depends on the song, depends on if they're learning an instrument and playing. It depends on if they're mixing it or they're becoming a DJ. What are the lyrics? What's the scale? Is it pushing music forward? Is it complex? What are the harmonies like? Like, goodness gracious, there are so many things, right? That you could say, is the song good or bad? And then also, if you're playing the drums for 8 hours a day, like maybe you're going to be a drummer. Maybe that's not bad either. I think the amount of people that are going to become professional gamers isn't like super high though. It's kind of like the NBA. So, again, can you sell it in that marketplace that they, that kids hopefully would be able to participate in, right? If you can say like, oh, he plays this game so well that other people are actually wanting to watch him and learn from his tactics and things like that, then there is value in that. But definitely can be taken to a bit of an extreme. But I just like the framing. What are you getting out of it? Do a thing and then assess, hey, am I more agitated when I'm done playing? Or do I feel like that was fun? And I for me as an adult, I think it totally depends on the game. Rocket League, even when I play terribly, I love the feeling like I'm done playing Rocket League. Like, yeah, that was a bunch of fun. There's some games that I'm done playing and I'm just a ball of nerves, and I'm just so stressed. And then other games are just really calming, and there's this kind of deep story. And it totally depends on every single game. And being able to recognize your feelings and your emotional IQ before, during, and after playing a game, I think is key to understanding, is that game good or bad, and what's the scale. You have to introduce some nuance and critical thinking to that, and to all other forms of art, to movies, to music, to whatever. So
I was just going to add that,
this
when my
was
son
y'all's
does
question, but I answered it. I'm sorry.
When my son comes up and he asks, like, he says, "Dad, I'm bored." Like, I just want him to know that there's more that you can do than just like go jump on a game. And I guess that's kind of to Alli's point. Like, are you spending time outside? Are you reading? Are you learning? Are you doing other things that are creative, drawing and whatnot? And so, I just don't want him to, even though I think Minecraft, I actually am a big advocate of Minecraft, and Jesse, I like what you said about it too. I've got no problems with Minecraft, but I just don't want it to be like, I'm bored, so I'm going to play Minecraft. I want it to be like, I'm bored, so sometimes I'll play Minecraft and then we're good. As opposed to like making that the automatic go-to. Yeah.
I think, so just to kind of add on real quick, I think on, something like Minecraft, it's like I want to play Minecraft because I'm almost done building this cathedral or something, right? Like accomplishing some task within the game versus playing it as a result of I'm bored versus I'm trying to accomplish this goal in it. Those are two really different things for kids. And so I would hope it's the goal accomplishment that they're shooting for and not just, oh, I'm bored, so I'm going to go watch YouTube or something like that.
That's true. Well, Minecraft is a great game for accomplishing goals too, because no matter what the mode is, like, yeah, you can build some really cool stuff, but also like in survival mode, you can be like, I'm gonna herd these sheep and I'm gonna put them in a fence, farmer. And so there's like constant goals that you can work toward, as long as you are willing to read a little bit and learn about it. So,
right.
Well, guys, thank you so much for the time. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Sure. I know. Well, James, did you want to talk about Cami real quick? Because I know that Alli's daughter is working for us.
Yeah. So a little bit before the podcast, Alli said that Cami is having a good time working for us, and so we actually have a lot of connections to the full disclosure. We have a lot of connections to Jesse, obviously business partner of Jeff. Alli is the mother of one of our instructors, Cami, and so. We didn't know all these connections existed. I didn't know Alli before Cami worked for us, but then y'all are the only two, quote unquote teachers, guides at Acton. And so it all kind of came together. So what's your experience been as a mother with all of this education stuff happening and then with Cami starting to work for us? What has that been like from your perspective? Like listening to her talk about her classes and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that she found you guys and just found an outlet for her technology savviness, which I am not. But she also loves kids, and so it's been really fun for her. As far as my take on the whole education thing, do you mean like during COVID and post-pandemic?
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions we had. I don't know if I asked very directly, but like, yeah, how is that gonna change things going forward?
Well, I'm really glad that I found Acton when I did, because I can't imagine my kid in traditional school right now with all of this, and also having to teach with partitions and everybody in masks, and just especially young kids, how that would work.
To be clear, y'all are in person right now? Yeah.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the student body like? I don't think we even covered that. Like the number of students?
We've got 31, 32, I think, starting in the spring, and it's pretty awesome. Evenly spread between 5 to 12. They're pretty balanced in there.
Yeah, so I'm not a health inspector, like how many kids do you have in here and then all this stuff, but the reason I'm asking is like does that make it easier to kind of shift policy and to make health accommodations and stuff than like a school of like 700 kids?
Yeah, for sure. And
it's a leading question, I guess.
At various times throughout the year, we've had certain students that decide, I want to be at home this week, and we can make that happen. You don't have to wait until the end of the 6 weeks or end of the 9 weeks, and then no.
Man. It's one of the things I love about Acton. I'm sorry, Alli. Alli, I lost your audio for a second. I don't know if you.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it was just me.
Hear me now?
Yeah, I can. But yeah, it's one of the things I love about Acton is that you can, like, if there was a pandemic again, which hopefully we're getting past this one soon. But if there was another one, you could just be like, yeah, I'm gonna pull my kid out for like a week or two, whatever. Yeah. I've always looked at it more from the Disney World perspective. Like, if you're in public school and you're just like, we're going to Disney World, then everybody's gonna get mad at you. You can't do it. Truancy.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
But with Acton, it's just, I mean, I guess that's true for private schools in general, but I think Acton understands like there are great benefits in taking your child on a trip, on a foreign trip, or going to Disney World or going to the national parks or something. There's just so much to gain there.
Yeah, but I feel like we have kind of a little haven here where kids are really getting to be kids and function pretty normally. They spend a couple hours, mine spend a couple hours outside every day, and they're getting to run and move, socialize, and it feels like a really healthy atmosphere.
Well,
That's
and the other
awesome.
thing is, I feel like I'm in a role playing in my head, right? But if I was a kid at Acton, which is kind of the mindset I've been putting myself in, it's like, I think I'd miss it after a week or two. Like, I'd want to go back and I want to start doing the business, and I'd want to start, what I miss out on in the marketplace. I'm gone for, you want to catch up. And I thought, Jeff, when you said, the Disneyland effect or whatever, I thought you were talking about like going to school is actually fun and is Disneyland, right? And so you wouldn't want to be gone for too long. So and that's the other thing is if you're running a school that has students that it's just optional if they come, man, you want it to be fun. You want it to be engaging in the truest aspect of that, because then they feel like they're missing out on something if they're not being there. And it sounds like that's the case. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't still be around, right? Like it seems to be working.
Right.
So,
Well,
like
yeah.
Jeff said, yeah.
It
Go ahead,
really
Alli.
is atmosphere. The kids want to be here. We start school at 8:30, and half the kids are here by like what 7:45.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
As soon as I pull in the driveway, they're like, "Oh, we were just around the corner."
Yeah.
We're gonna come bug you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
because it's their own community here. Like I can, I sit and do what I need to do, and they
They
go
know.
and sit and talk, or they go out back and play. And I mean, I don't want to sound cliche or anything, but they are their own little family. Like they have, we call the first 7 weeks building the tribe, because they are building a community that they guard with the highest level of security that they can, and they are incredibly strict and tough on anybody who wants to join. They have extremely high expectations of anybody that wants to try to join. So it makes it really good, because they become this awesome filter, and they will work out whatever, flaws or issues somebody might have as they, do their trial days or something. They're going to make sure that those aren't something that would be damaging to the community. And so, they do love coming here. My 3 daughters that are with me here, they hate going on break, because then they just have dad as the guide at home, and they don't have their friends to like go complain to. So, they love, they miss school after a week, and so that's just, I think that's the way it should be. You should love coming to a place where you also learn a ton, right? Those two things should go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you again for taking the time to talk to us. And we, it's the one thing, it's the one reason why I could have seen myself moving to Katy, Texas,
Yeah.
just to send Oscar to Jesse's school.
We might see when
Really
Jacob's old
awesome.
enough. We'll be weighing the options.
Absolutely.
But you're in a good school district anyway.
It's true. It's true, right? Good by
All right.
public standards. It's true. Katy ISD, we love you.
Guys, thank you again. Great to talk to you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you.
See y'all.
Thanks.